I had worked as an overworked assistant for my alpha boss, George Wigglesworth, for 7 years. Then I received a terminal illness diagnosis. When my resignation was rejected, I snapped and confessed my love to him on the spot. His wide-eyed panic only made me bolder. I started going off the rails. He'd sit down to eat. I'd flip the table. He'd try to sleep. I'd blast music. He'd walk past me with his tight suits and cold indifference. I'd grope him with zero shame. It was the golden age of my corporate rebellion. Until one night, the hospital called to say it had all been a mistake. A misdiagnosis. I was, in fact, in perfect health. With a fresh, clean bill of health in hand, I strutted into George Wigglesworth's office, ready to reclaim my dignity. He turned to me slowly, with a sinister, chilling little smile, and pulled out a new report from his drawer. A pregnancy test. Excuse me? Alphas can get pregnant now? Welcome to He History Channel. Subscribe to follow all our latest adventures. Story begins. I received my medical report, and a bitter taste crept up my throat. A message popped up from George Wigglesworth, my alpha boss. Did you get your hospital results? When are you coming back? His concern warmed me for a second, and I started typing a reply to reassure him. Then came his next message. I'll let today's half-day slide. Just come in on Sunday to make up for it. My fingers froze. I pursed my lips, deleted all the tender words I'd written, and sent him only 3 dots. Then I submitted my resignation on the company app, and approved it myself. But the system immediately returned with a denial. Trying to quit again? Out of 365 days a year, you want to resign on at least 360 of them. Come back early. You're attending a dinner with me tonight. I left him on read. My last shred of dignity. As his top executive assistant, I was equally good at managing financial reports and ironing his shirts. But this time, I really had no energy left. Still I went back. George was waiting at his desk, a stack of documents pushed aside as he held his arms open with the innocence of a saint. Where's my lunch? I let out a hollow laugh. He had chronic gastritis. Skipped meals gave him stomachaches, and I was always the one sent to buy his meds. I turned without a word and went to the break room. Made him instant noodles, tomato-flavored, and even tossed in a sausage. Plopped it on his desk. Eat. Normally, I would never let him touch junk food. Every meal he ate was prepped by me. But now, I didn't have the strength to eat myself, let alone take care of him. My life was falling apart. I had other things to worry about. George poked the noodles with a fork, face wrinkling. Morton Bruce, what the hell are you doing? I sat across from him, face stone cold. I'm quitting. He chewed 2 bites before pushing the food away, suddenly losing all appetite. I'll triple your salary. 1 month paid vacation. Just don't quit. I shook my head. When his eyes turned red, I almost softened. What kind of alpha can't handle a little hardship? And yet, it made my heart ache. I didn't want him to be sad. So the resignation went nowhere. Working for George Wigglesworth? I'd had enough. That night, I attended the banquet with him. Halfway through the event, I realized, how the hell did I get roped into slaving away for him again? Our outfits matched perfectly. Looked like we were a couple. Used to think nothing of it. Now it just felt cruel. I didn't have much time left. George still had a long life ahead of him. Marriage, kids, a future. I stumbled on a forum post. I confessed to my boss today. Haven't worked a single late night since. No coworkers messing with me anymore. Still getting paid on time. Tempting. Very tempting. George had already had 3 drinks. He was swaying a little. He mumbled, Morton Bruce, why aren't you helping me drink anymore? I leaned close and whispered into his ear, George Wigglesworth, I like you. I've wanted to tell you this for a long time. But soon, you won't have to see me again. His cheeks were flushed, his tone irritated. What kind of nonsense are you on about now? I chuckled. I knew it. He'd end up hating me for this. Even after working under him for 7 years, the one thing I didn't want was for him to hate me. Next thing I knew, he dragged me into the restroom. Soft lips. Gentle pressure. Hesitant. Then, deeper. "Morton Bruce, is that really how you confess?" he murmured. I looked up into his smiling eyes. My heart skipped. His voice was thick with drink, nasal and soft. "And then, drunk on alcohol and maybe something else, we did something incredibly stupid. I bent my boss over. And now, I was pretty sure he might kill me. The next morning, I splashed cold water on my face. George just asked me to help him change clothes so we could go to work. A normal person would have taken the day off. Rested. Regretted. Not George. He had to flex his superior alpha genes and insisted on going in. "You should rest," I grumbled. He shot me a look. "Will you handle those parasites in my place?" I clicked my tongue. His family was a mess of freeloaders living off him, and his father, brainwashed by a mistress, was the worst of them all. I'd helped clean up a lot of that dirt over the years. For his sake, we were good bros after all, helped each other out. With a sigh, I made him breakfast and drove him to the office. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked as I dropped off some papers. He was buried in work. "No, I don't want to look at any of this." I finished what he hadn't touched. Even ate his leftovers from lunch. Truly, I had become the ultimate human garbage disposal. Wait, wasn't I supposed to be done with this crap? Why was I back to being his lapdog? "Mr. Bruce, here's the Q2 report. We've made 5 revisions. Could you give this to Mr. Wigglesworth?" One of the junior secretaries handed it to me, nervous. I flipped through. Profits were down compared to last quarter. No wonder George was fuming. I nodded and knocked on his door. He scowled. "Playing the good guy again? Clean off my desk." I handed over the file. "Boss, you rejected my confession. I'm heartbroken. I can't work under these conditions." Then I left. He stared after me, stunned. Back at my desk, I had all my unfinished files rerouted to his inbox via the secretaries. I was done. Watered my little plant. Bought some yarn and tried to knit a scarf. Ignored every single one of George's meeting invites. My office life? Peaceful bliss. George just gave me crazy person stares. Glared at me, then went to meetings. Like I was the heartbreaker. But I was the one with the rejected confession, "Thank you very much." He drove, I rode shotgun. I ordered takeout, he shared it. I slacked off, he pulled overtime. And somehow, he tolerated it all. He must have figured out I was dying. And decided to be kind, for whatever little time I had left. George Wigglesworth and I had been best friends since high school. To help him establish himself in the company, I followed him straight into the battlefield of corporate hell and worked under him for 7 years. And because George was a notoriously delicate alpha, I naturally moved in with him too, strictly for the sake of convenience and care. After all, we'd been roommates for over a decade. No pair could be tighter than us. That night, I stood at his door, watching the light under the cracks still glowing. I lifted my hand to knock and remind him to sleep, then slowly lowered it. He needed to start learning how to take care of himself. Still, I couldn't shake the bitterness in my chest. What if he left? What if someone bullied him? Without me, the ever-loyal best friend, to back him up, what if he got hurt? My phone rang. It was my family. "How long are you going to keep working for George Wigglesworth? Our company's 10 times the size of his. Your father is waiting for you to take over. When are you coming back? Your father's birthday banquet is this month. I don't care how you're coming." Before I could say anything, my sister hung up. She ran her own studio and had been trying to shove parts of the family business at me for years. I kept declining, saying George's company still needed me. Back at home, I dragged my sister aside, avoiding the guests. "I'm not going to live much longer," I said quietly. "I've been diagnosed with a terminal illness." My sister burst out laughing. "Yeah, right. The devil never dies." They didn't believe me. So they called the Bruce family's personal physician and made me do a full body exam. The 3 of us, Dad, Sis, and me, stared at the report with very different expressions. "Mr. Bruce is in excellent health," the doctor said. The misdiagnosis was likely due to an unexpected secondary gender differentiation. "He's now an enigma." I was doomed. I'd spent over a month being an absolute menace in front of George Wigglesworth. If he found out, I was dead meat. While I was still panicking, my dad clapped me on the shoulder. Perfect. Let's add a matchmaking event to my birthday banquet. I pressed my lips together. Refused. But my dad had a temper, and in the end, I caved. Planned to show my face and get it over with. The banquet was packed. I spotted George instantly. He came alone this time. In the past, I was always the one dragging him to these things. He didn't greet me. That's when I realized there was someone standing next to me, a potential omega match. When I turned back, George was gone. Suddenly, my chest tightened. I pushed through the crowd, cornered a server, and finally found George wiping his eyes in the bathroom. His eyes were red. You okay? I rushed over, pulling out a handkerchief to dab his face. Morton Bruce, he snapped, voice shaking, I'm not okay. I don't need your fake sympathy. He shoved me aside. In that moment, every mistake I'd ever made came rushing back to me. That omega, I blurted, has nothing to do with me. My family set up some blind dates. I turned them all down. Every single one. George sniffled. Are you coming back with me or not? I nodded hard. Of course I was. To work for George Wigglesworth again. Something felt off. I turned and saw my sister and father standing behind us, their faces full of disappointment. George really trained him into a lapdog. Seductive types always win. I chalked it up to them teasing our ironclad friendship. Once I realized I wasn't dying, I returned to my usual overworked assistant self. Passing by the break room, I overheard a few employees chatting. Didn't Mr. Wigglesworth and Mr. Bruce fight the other day? I thought they'd give each other the cold shoulder for weeks. Please. They're like a married couple. Fight at the head of the bed, make up at the foot. Mr. Bruce spoils him too much to hold a grudge. Mr. Bruce could win Best Husband material this year. When are they getting married already? I want wedding cake. I couldn't listen anymore. A perfectly platonic friendship being misread as romance? Wait, George said later, lounging in his chair with a mischievous smile. You were acting out because you thought you were terminally ill? He knew everything. Of course he did. The electronic health report was synced to my phone. Whose chart did you even look at? I messed up. I dropped to my knees. George pressed a finger to my lips. Don't rush to apologize. That wasn't your only mistake. Then he pulled out a pregnancy test report. I'm pregnant. Over a month now. My jaw dropped. Is it mine? He gave a cold laugh. I broke into a sweat. Slapped myself across the mouth. It's mine. Definitely mine. A big, strong alpha for sure. George raised an eyebrow. What, you got something against omegas? I finally understood the phrase. The more you say, the more you screw up. Could an enigma and an alpha make an omega? Who knew? I should have shut up and begged for mercy. Instead, I slunk out and brought him a glass of milk. George made me pay for everything. No sugar. Fin. Too hot. Fin. Too sweet. Fin. Even the rest of the executive team stopped working just to watch me go back and forth. Finally, 1 cup, precisely 50 degrees Celsius, 70% sweet, passed inspection. He drank half. That was a blessing in itself. Mr. Bruce, someone whispered, why is Mr. Wigglesworth in such a bad mood today? Mr. Bruce, please save us. We're collateral damage. Mr. Bruce, how long do we have to keep working here before he's satisfied? Whenever George had a tantrum, the whole office suffered. Morale plummeted. I cleared my throat. It's my fault. Everyone gave me solemn looks of sympathy. He used to be the only one who could handle Mr. Wigglesworth, and even he's fallen. Did Mr. Bruce force himself on him? Probably more than once. Apparently, everyone already knew the truth. I remembered that night. The wine. The heat. George begged me to stop. But I didn't let go until morning light crept through the windows and sleep finally claimed me. Not gonna lie. Still kinda delicious in hindsight. I slapped myself. Morton Bruce, what kind of thoughts are you having about your best friend? This is a betrayal of over a decade of brotherhood. George treats me like a servant, driver, cleaner, cook, and I do everything without question. Now, I worked harder than ever before. Because if he fired me, I'd be done for. Karma really doesn't skip anyone. I once begged him to fire me. Now I was begging him to take me back. At least for the sake of the child, we could pretend to have a proper family. Every time George Wigglesworth so much as frowned, my knees felt like someone had poured liquid jelly down them, itching to drop and beg for forgiveness. Especially when those polished leather shoes of his pressed down against my slacks, and that proud, imperious gaze sat beneath that stunningly handsome face. Morton Bruce, have you lost your damn mind? I broke into a cold sweat. Just before the workday ended, George called me into his office. Morton Bruce, he said casually, twirling a pen, I hear Roland Garson's company is offering you a fat paycheck to jump ship. I immediately stood at attention. I swear my loyalty is with this company. No amount of money could ever lure me away. George grinned like a fox. What if I want you to go, as a mole? I froze, unsure if he was joking. A doctor friend once told me, pregnancy hormones cause wild emotional swings. I had to go along with whatever George wanted. Heartbreaking as it was, I nodded solemnly. All right, I'll do it. He waved me off. As I gathered my things, I barely managed to say a word before he impatiently shoved me out, calling me naggy. Clutching a cardboard box, I walked out of the company like a man exiled. Mr. Bruce, you're really leaving? What about us lowly corporate drones? Did you actually win a fight with the boss? Mr. Bruce, anyone could quit, but not you. Maybe talk to him again. Their concern warmed me, but I still shook my head. No. Mr. Wigglesworth has his reasons. And I sighed like a tragic hero. George didn't stop there. He refused to let me step foot back into the house we'd shared. Said it was for the sake of appearances, to really commit to the double agent act. He even packed all my belongings and gave me a one-day eviction notice. Arms crossed, chin up, he looked victorious. He tilted my chin with one finger. You're not going to betray me, right? I shook my head furiously. Of course not. We were practically stitched into the same pair of pants. I'd never turn my back on George. While I was frantically trying to rent a place, Roland Garson, the competition, invited me to dinner. At the restaurant, he got straight to the point. Heard you got canned by George Wigglesworth? Gossip was everywhere. 7-year assistant unceremoniously fired. Was it twisted loyalty or a collapse of morals? I let out a sigh. Roland's eyes gleamed. He patted my shoulder. He doesn't appreciate your talent. I lowered my head. Mr. Wigglesworth drinks 45-degree hand-ground coffee every day. Changes clothes at least once per shift. His overtime depends entirely on his mood. Roland thought I was complaining. But honestly, I'd done all that willingly. Because George was a workaholic alpha, high-maintenance, drop-dead gorgeous, and allergic to the temptations of the outside world. I preferred him like that. That's why, every time he suggested going out to bars, I'd dump extra reports on his desk until he had zero free time. Even at home, I made sure we weren't apart for more than an hour. What kind of brothers went to that extent? Only us. Only George and me. Our friendship was one of a kind. Roland clinked glasses with me. Mr. Bruce, I really admire your dedication. At our firm, you won't need to do grunt work. Just focus on your strengths. I nodded. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Garson. I can start immediately. I played along like I was touched, but secretly, I glanced at the hidden camera sewn into my collar. Hopefully George wouldn't hold what I said against me. It was all for the mission. The flashing red light looked like George's heartbeat thudding in the dark. And suddenly, I missed him. We'd only been apart 2 days. Habit is a scary thing. That night, I climbed back into our old house. Snuck in while everyone was asleep. No one saw. Watched George sleep for a while. Then I released a bit of my scent into the room. Enigmas are dependent on pheromones during pregnancy. I even left behind a vial of purified scent from my glands, mixed into the room's diffuser. The fragrance I'd chosen had always smelled like my natural scent. That was on purpose. Even if I couldn't stay with George every moment, at least the room could smell like I'd never left. Then I leaned down and brushed a featherlight kiss across his lips. And ran back to my rented place, cheeks burning. It had to be the hormones. A camera tucked in the corner captured everything crystal clear. And in his sleep, George smiled faintly. Once I officially joined Roland's company, he gave me a full tour. I was too distracted to pay attention. How was George eating without me? What about dinner? Lunch hour was flexible. I didn't bother with much food. Instead, I threw on a mask and cap, grabbed a bento box, and snuck into George's underground garage. He was leaning against the car window. The second he spotted me, his eyes narrowed. "What are you doing here?" I pulled down my mask. "You should cut down on junk food. It's bad for you. This is shredded pork in garlic sauce and stir-fried pork belly. Just eat a little. I'll make you something else tonight." He took the box and smirked. I changed the locks. I hesitated. "I'll leave dinner at your door." He raised an eyebrow. "What am I, some helpless invalid who needs a nanny to feed him?" I lit up. "I can be your nanny. At the very least I owe you, and the baby, that much." He burst out laughing. "I don't need a nanny. Just stay at Garson's company and quit sneaking over." He poked me in the chest. "Unless you want me stressed to death?" He was so close. His eyelashes brushed his cheeks like tiny fans, tickling something deep in me. I shoved down the impulse to reach for him. Left, a little heartbroken. The bento box had been jostled during the drive, mixing sauce into the rice. A big no-no for George. And yet, he ate every bite. Slowly, methodically. Then he stared off in the direction I'd gone, eyes soft and reluctant. After helping Roland win several major contracts, he basically worshipped me. My schedule became flexible and I got actual weekends. Roland thought he'd given me the keys to paradise, compared to the hellscape that was George's company. But I barely noticed. All I wanted was to finish this double agent mission and go home. Every time I checked in with George, he got colder. Sometimes he didn't even reply to my messages for a week. I called my doctor friend. "Has George lost all sense of brotherhood?" "You know what? Go sit in an ice bath," he snapped. "Don't bring your relationship drama into my single, peaceful life." I hung up in disappointment. Went out to drink with a few low-life buddies. They pulled in someone who looked as miserable as I felt. His name? Fred Wigglesworth. Not a common surname. He was 3 years younger than George. And, coincidentally, the same age as George's long-lost little brother. Curious, I leaned in to hear his story. Fred just stared into his drink and kept sipping in silence. His story came out disjointed, scattered like broken glass. "Morton," he asked hoarsely, "do you think someone can come back from the dead?" His eyes were bloodshot, his voice low and shaky. I saw him again. It took a few minutes of tangled words before I pieced it together. Fred had married an Omega in a business deal, someone he barely knew. By the time he actually fell in love, it was too late. The Omega had passed away in an accident. I didn't know how to comfort him. But if I imagine myself in his shoes, and that person was George Wigglesworth, I don't think I'd survive it either. I'd probably follow him into the afterlife. Without George, my remaining years would feel like a gaping wound in time. A hole that nothing could ever fill. All I could do was pat Fred's back and tell him to stay strong. There was nothing else to say. Then Fred suddenly stiffened, gripping his glass. "I really saw him," he said. "This time, I'm not letting go." I mumbled a reply. Real or not, sometimes hope is the only thing that keeps people moving forward. We kept drinking. The conversation was a mess. The alcohol flowed endlessly. We exchanged numbers before I had a driver take him home. As the liquor settled into my head, I fumbled for my phone. 2 missed calls. One from George Wigglesworth. The other from my sister. Suddenly, the haze cleared. Cold sweat broke out along my spine. Her message read, "You want a wife or not? Get over here, now." Then a location pin dropped, the Wigglesworth family estate. I dialed George back, but the number was disconnected. Panic seized my throat. I begged the driver to step on it. "Double your rate, just go." The riverside wind outside the window snapped me fully sober. Fred's grief had made me ache, but I never thought I'd be living out my own worst-case scenario. My heart slammed against my ribs. When we arrived at the estate, I was turned away at the gate. "No visitors," they said. "Orders from the family." They sent guards to drag me off. Bad move. I'd taken Sonda in college. I wasn't going down easy. Not one of them could stop me. A man finally stepped forward, that familiar glint of malice in his smile. "I'll give you an hour to find him," George's father said. "After that, I'll throw you out myself." "Man in car." He added with a smirk, "By the way, George isn't here." George Wigglesworth's father, knife hidden in every word. I'd rushed here too fast. My backup team was still en route. I needed to stall him. I opened the tracking app on my phone. Found George's location. When he was a kid, George and his younger brother were kidnapped by a rival family. The kidnappers didn't plan to let them go. When they finally stormed the hideout, only George was left. The trauma broke something in him. For a while, he stopped speaking altogether. Back then, I just transferred schools and knew nothing about it. Just thought George was hard to get along with. But I was stubborn. He was aloof, refined, and beautiful. So naturally, I wanted to be friends. The more time we spent together, the more of his story I uncovered. I wasn't surprised. I just hurt for him. For his coming of age, I gave him a necklace. One that had been blessed at a temple. It had a tiny tracking chip hidden inside. I never told him. But I'd made a promise. If he were ever in danger again, I'd find him. No matter what. He'd worn it every day since. Just like our friendship, it never came off. I found him in the family shrine behind the estate. Collapsed on the floor. Unconscious. His phone shattered nearby. I scooped him up in my arms and ran. Our backup had arrived, surrounding the estate. I turned to the guards, fury twisting my voice. "If anything happens to George Wigglesworth, I'll bury this entire damn family." I carried him into the car. Right before we left, I shot his father a look sharp enough to gut. Caught his stepmother's guilty glance, too. The car sped off. George felt lighter than ever in my arms, despite being pregnant. Still dressed in a crisp suit. I gently pulled off his jacket. His back was covered in whip marks. Every stripe deep and deliberate. Didn't take a genius to know who did it. The Wigglesworth family was truly despicable. I touched his wounds with trembling fingers, heart breaking all over again. He whimpered in his sleep, eyebrows twitching, shivering against my chest. They'd dared lay a hand on him? They'd messed with the wrong man. When we were younger, I once had to stay over during a storm. That's when I first noticed how badly George slept, tossing, waking, haunted by nightmares. So I insisted on sharing a bed. My calm presence slowly rewired his nights. Over the years, he'd grown healthier. But tonight, this was a relapse. One I hadn't seen in years. It hurt to witness. I pulled him closer, held him tightly, whispered to him until his breathing steadied. At the hospital, chaos erupted. The doctors circled me, scolding like furious hens. "He's only 2 months along. Do you know how unstable the fetus already was? Now with this trauma, he needs 2 full weeks of bed rest. You call yourself his husband? Where's your responsibility? He's lacking proper pheromone support during pregnancy. Don't you even know the basics?" I stood there, guilt pouring from every pore. Back when we were teens, I once took his hand and promised I'd never let him get hurt again. That I'd always stay by his side. Now, that oath came back like a blade, piercing right between my eyes. Working at Roland's firm, I'd seen him less and less. And now, he'd been hurt. Under my watch. I cursed myself. Slapped myself across the face. Then ordered an investigation. And surprisingly, found something. George had been under pressure from the board lately, work piling high, no end in sight. And then his family summoned him home. He knew it was a trap. Tried to call me ahead of time, but the call didn't go through. So he went alone. What he didn't expect. His stepmother, also pregnant, accusing him of trying to harm her unborn child. Mr. Wigglesworth, his father, wasn't stupid. He knew exactly what his wife was doing. But still he chose to stand by her. Let it happen. Mr. Wigglesworth had never cared for the 2 children from his first marriage. One went missing over a decade ago, and he couldn't even be bothered to look for him. Every search, every thread of effort, was George Wigglesworth's alone. And now, George had been flogged and locked in the family shrine, forced to kneel as punishment. His phone had been smashed. According to the family, this was to teach him a lesson, to remind him who held the reins in the Wigglesworth family. A private investigator delivered me a thick folder of evidence. I read through it page by page, then slammed my fist down and shattered the glass coffee table. The timing of the board's power struggle coincided with the exact moment George sent me to the rival company. Could it be he already sensed danger closing in and wanted to keep me away? If I had been with him, would he have still been hurt? Now, I sat at George's bedside, gently holding his hand, releasing small waves of pheromones to help him sleep more peacefully. Every breath he took tugged at my heart. This feeling was strange. Could a normal person really feel this level of possessiveness for their best friend? I called my sister. "Hey sis, I think I'm in love with George Wigglesworth." She snorted. "Morton Bruce, are you out of your mind? Haven't you basically been dating George for years? Now you're telling me you think you like him?" Her teasing threw me off. Completely. Until today, I'd always believed my feelings for George were pure brotherhood. I tried to argue. But she nailed me with every word. "You've kissed him. You've slept with him. You're having a child together. And you're still calling this a friendship? You've spoiled that man like he's made of porcelain. Morton Bruce, you're dumber than a brick." I nodded. My God, she was right. It was my own fault. I figured it out too late. She warned me before hanging up, "Watch out for Dad." Sure enough, I started digging and found out the truth. My father, Lucas Bruce Sun, had contacted George behind my back, warned him to stay away from me, told him we were impossible, and that he'd never approve of an relationship, let alone George becoming his daughter-in-law. I was livid. I called him furious. "Old man, if you can't accept George as part of this family, then you can forget you even have a son. Your grandchild nearly left this world thanks to your bullshit." Lucas Bruce rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Wait, there's really a grandchild? Thank the heavens. The Bruce family finally has an heir." He sighed dramatically. "Had I known, I'd never have opposed your little AA romance, though I still didn't see you evolving into an E. My dad may be ruthless, but he knew how to make amends. He immediately transferred 20% of the company shares to George, and split the rest between me and my sister. A gesture of repentance. I rolled my eyes, then handed my own shares over to George too. Spoiling your spouse wasn't something to measure in numbers. I'd give him the world and gladly. When George woke up, he looked dazed. "Who are you?" He pulled his hand from mine, eyes wary. To him, I was a stranger. The doctors ran a full set of neurological tests. Turned out George remembered everything, except me. He flinched from my presence. Didn't even want me inside the hospital room. So I stood outside like some kind of concierge. Fred Wigglesworth and a few friends came to visit him. Through the glass, I watched George's eyes light up the moment Fred entered. He jumped from the bed and walked straight toward him. I rushed in to support him, but George shoved me aside. I had no choice. I quietly asked the others to keep an eye on him. "You must be my long-lost brother," George said, voice trembling. Fred looked completely lost. But I knew what this meant. George had never forgiven himself for losing his little brother. That scar had never healed. I pulled Fred aside and explained everything, briefly, cleanly. Then plucked a hair from each of them and sent it in for an expedited DNA test. Results arrived the same day. Unsurprisingly, Fred really was George's brother. I gave them time to reconnect alone. Later, Fred walked out and said he'd try to live a bit longer. At least long enough to be with George. I understood. Fred had removed his scent gland. Without a transplant, he likely had less than 2 years left. But I respected his choice. George, meanwhile, still wouldn't let me near him. He hated even seeing my face. So I turned my attention to wrapping up things at Roland Garson's company. Roland, for the record, wasn't innocent. He'd spread rumors about George's company and poached his clients. I collected evidence of tax fraud and embezzlement. sent everything to the authorities. Then gradually tanked performance on purpose. When I finally resigned, Roland practically booted me out the door like a curse that wouldn't die. Fine by me. There was still more pain coming his way. Back at George's company, chaos reigned. With him still recovering, his father's illegitimate son had taken over temporarily. Problem was, the guy was an absolute idiot. Knew nothing about management. And the opportunists around him? They enabled him. Investments tanked. Losses stacked up month after month. The board of directors went berserk. They were ready to throw the bastard out. Meanwhile, the family was tearing itself apart in civil war. I tossed a match on the pile. Using Bruce Group as bait, I faked a collaboration with the Wigglesworth family. Then withdrew all funding midway through. Their cash flow collapsed. Their stock price plummeted. Investors dumped everything and ran. The illegitimate son? Too scared to even show up to work. As for Mr. Wigglesworth? Well, turns out he'd been fooling around outside again. George's stepmother caught him red-handed. She wasn't the forgiving type. Last I heard, Mr. Wigglesworth was beaten so badly he couldn't even crawl out of the family mansion, let alone run a company. As for the bodyguards who disciplined George, some of them were mine. Spies planted from the start. And I made sure none of them would walk away unscathed. The illegitimate son got jumped one night while taking a shortcut under cover of darkness. Someone shoved a sack over his head and gave him the beating of a lifetime. Unfortunately for him, it happened in a camera blind spot. No footage, no witnesses, and even the cops came up empty. He could only grit his teeth and swallow the loss. Meanwhile, George Wigglesworth was recovering in his hospital suite, well-fed and cared for. The pallor in his face had faded, replaced with a healthy flush. While he rested, I took the opportunity to study every detail about pregnancy care. Passed the OBGYN's exam with a perfect score. But still, he wouldn't let me near him. So I snuck in at night, again and again, releasing just enough of my scent to soothe him. Some nights, when I was too tired, I'd sleep under his hospital bed, curled up like a stray. Then crawl out at dawn before anyone noticed. My sister mocked me endlessly for living like a vagabond, sneaking around in shadows. But honestly, I didn't mind one bit. Back at the Wigglesworth Group, the company was a complete mess. After George had recovered enough, he returned to the office and reclaimed his position at the top. He ruled with his usual intensity, swift, decisive, commanding. But his desk was still a disaster. His schedule? Chaotic. No one could replace the work I used to do. Not really. And it frustrated him. There was someone, he thought, someone who used to handle everything for him. But the harder he tried to remember, the worse the migraines became. So he buried himself in work instead. I felt bad that he still had to juggle a company and a child on the way. So I quietly stepped into the role of a modern-day fairy godmother. During the day, I hid in the executive suite wearing a mask, organizing his paperwork. At lunch, I cooked for him. Every takeout order he placed? That was me, pretending to be a delivery guy. At night, I snuck into his house to serve as a walking, breathing pheromone diffuser. Sometimes I even cleaned his home and did laundry like a live-in maid. Whatever George needed, I did it. Gladly. One night, I passed out on the living room couch, completely drained. Suddenly, a flashlight beamed straight into my face. George stood there, alert and suspicious. Our eyes met. "You a thief?" he asked. "You're too hot to be stealing. You'd make better money as a hotel model." I touched my face. Okay, he wasn't wrong. I grinned. Still half asleep, I wrapped an arm around his waist and gently guided him back to bed. "It's late. Let's sleep first. Talk tomorrow." He mumbled something and let me pull him into the sheets. I hadn't realized it until then. He wasn't pushing me away anymore. Next morning, as usual, I gave him a kiss on the cheek to wake him up. "Pervert," he shouted, eyes flying open. "You rogue thief." Every accusation, I countered with a smile. "I love you, George Wigglesworth." I held his hand, poured all my shameless affection into it. Besides, the doctor said things were stable now. We could do certain things that made both of us happy. and I made sure he was very happy. So much so he passed out. And again. If it weren't for the baby, I swear I'd devour him whole, leave nothing untouched. Just so he'd finally understand, we belong together. Nothing could change that. Morton Bruce. Are you part dog? Let go already. When George finally regained consciousness, I tried to cuddle again. And got a slap. I licked my lips, turned the other cheek, and said sweetly, "This side too, baby." George burst out laughing. "What? You enjoy getting slapped now?" The bruises were perfectly symmetrical. And that's when he remembered me. Apparently, the Wigglesworth family had hired a hypnotherapist to mess with his memory. Their goal was to turn him into a complete idiot. Instead, he just forgot me, and nothing else. Their brilliant plan backfired spectacularly. I smiled at him, eyes gleaming. "So I'm the most important person to you, huh?" He kicked me off the bed. Thinking of quitting again? George was worried about his brother Fred, who was getting weaker by the day. But I'd seen enough of life and death to know, some people simply don't want to stay. And if that was the case, not even the best doctor could save them. George took time off work to accompany Fred, tried to show him the beauty of life again. But Fred remained distant. Disconnected. I got it. If I were in his shoes, I might have gone even crazier. But in March, something changed. Fred started paying attention to how he dressed. He talked like someone was with him. Someone real. Was it true? Who knows? Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing, being walked home by someone you love. As his body deteriorated, Fred's smile never faded. On the day he left us, the rain was soft and silent. He stood before a headstone, wrapped invisible arms around someone only he could see. Then turned to us with a faint smile. "Take care. This is goodbye." And vanished, like mist in the wind. I held George tightly, whispering comfort. "What would you do," he asked, "if I disappeared one day?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I'd find you," I said. "Be with you. I wouldn't care about anything else." Behind us, my sister gave George a big thumbs up. "You really are the top-tier dog trainer," she said. "You've turned my brother into a lovesick mutt." I fired back at her. George just chuckled, eyes warm and unreadable. After all these years, he finally got the tree stump to bloom. The end.
Thanks for stopping by. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos.